Welcome back to the Eye on College Basketball Podcast. We're on CBS Sports Network. I'm Gary Parrish. This is Matt Norlander, and Zach Edey earlier today became a two-time CBS Sports National Player of the Year. He will soon become a two-time Wooden Award winner, the first since Ralph Sampson in the early 80s. Everybody knows he's great at this point. I think everybody knows the basics at this point. But before Zach Edey was a National Player of the Year, you wrote a big profile on him to sort of tell his story. How did this 7'4" Canadian become the best college basketball player in the country 2 straight years?
Yeah, man, he's gone through so much since I wrote this profile. I flew out to West Lafayette, GP, last year, January of 23, and just before it was ultra well known that, you know, he rejected basketball, he liked playing hockey, he liked playing baseball, which have become cliche talking points on it. I kind of dug into the why of Zach Edey and how he was able to do this. He was specific. He had a stubbornness about him. He rejected it because he didn't want to play basketball because everyone assumed that he would want to. And then it got to a certain point where he had a genuine love for the game, but he didn't play organized basketball at a high level until, you know, his closing years of high school. It's kind of wild. And because he was so tall, he eventually got to be recruited by the likes of Baylor, Purdue, Western Kentucky, 1 or 2 other schools. But Purdue has been the big man factory. Painter has specialized in that. And he quietly paid his dues. I mean, he got to Purdue, was not an immediate impact player, but I remember talking with Steve Lutz, who just a few days ago got hired at Oklahoma State, was the lead recruiter for Zach Edey at Purdue, and I remember him telling me this would have been, I guess, midway through his sophomore year, maybe going into sophomore year. He's like, Edey will be the guy. Like I remember talking to him because we do our top 101 preseason players list, and I always try and hit up a bunch of different coaches. And he was basically saying, like, you're going to want to rank Edey high. And I was like, high? He's like, he's going to be a monster.
Because for people who don't know, the year before Zach Edey became the National Player of the Year, he was a part-time player splitting time in Purdue's front court with Trevion Williams.
Correct. And so it was the fact that Matt Painter didn't play both. I think I remember writing about it or tweeting about it.
They didn't play at the same time.
There was like 2 plays the entire season that the Painter was like, all right, because of this specific design, we're going to have 2, but they didn't do it. And so he waited his turn. And what's always been true about Zach Edey is he's a quick study, he's patient, and he has a discipline about him that is relentless, and it has paid off. I actually think he's more athletic than he's given credit for. I think he's got a ton of grace for a 7'4" person. I mean, listen, you and I both, since we've seen each other here on this set, have had less than graceful moments, and we're nowhere near 7'4". But Edey has great touch, great passing, and he has turned into a behemoth. And I think one of the most important things is Edey gets most of the credit. And Painter, how he has used him has been incredible, because there's not a lot of 7'4" dudes that are as good as Edey, but we see 7'1", 7'2", 7'3" guys, and they're just not as productive. They just are not. It's been amazing, and his relationship in particular with his mom Julia, who's been a champion. You'll see her she'll be caught on television cameras again on Saturday. Just has been amazing. She's lived in West Lafayette in the same town as him, and he's an awesome story. A really, really great dude, soft-spoken. There's no assumptions about him whatsoever, and he's at once a throwback in terms of his style, but also just kind of who he is. He dominates in 2024. He would have dominated in 2004, 94, and 1964.
The only difference between 2024 and, say, 1964 or 1984, well, there's a lot of differences.
I'm about to say the only difference?
We don't really have the time for that today. A lot of differences, but among them would be in 1984 or 1994, he would be the number 1 pick in the draft.
Yeah.
Where would he go now, and would you feel comfortable using a lottery pick on him?
See, this is an interesting question, because you get some disagreement among evaluators when it comes to this. I just can't. Me personally, I don't see why there's not room for Zach Edey. You see GP's mock draft here as a top 20 pick. I mean, I can't speak to for sure if he should or will go top 14 as lottery. But I have watched him, and I understand, like, he's not a great defender in space 18 feet away from the hoop. But you are hearing more and more people that are high major college coaches, high-profile coaches, NBA people saying No, there is room for a big man still in the NBA. It's not the game's not what it was. It's never going to go back to what it was. But if you're 7'4", super skilled, great at drawing contact, not getting into foul trouble, you're telling me that a franchise can't find use for Zach Edey for even 10 minutes a game, and because of his size and his touch that he won't have a 10-year NBA career? I reject that, and I'll say this, GP. And if you're watching the show, you see this outrageous stat that Zach Edey has had 30 and 15 going into a Final Four along the likes of Elvin Hayes, Jerry Lucas, Jerry West, Bill McGill, Chamberlain. It's an insane statistic right there. It is refreshing to hear that we are not abandoning what we're seeing in front of our eyes. I think even Dan Hurley would tell you it as well. We are just not abandoning the idea that he's an awesome, incredible player who's super efficient in addition to having all this great volume. He should be a top 20 pick.
I thought Dan Hurley made a great point earlier this week in an interview somewhere where he was asked about Zach Edey, and he said, I just think that if you're in the NBA and you can't figure out a way to use this guy, like maybe you're not thinking enough.
Yeah.
Maybe you're not playing basketball the right way. And I feel like we've got into, and I love the NBA. I don't never try to pit the two sports against each other. But I think we have gotten to a point in the NBA where sometimes people just make broad decisions about you. Like you can work and you can't work without saying this person is uniquely gifted and doing unprecedented things at the collegiate level. Let's sit down and figure it out. Like, let's get him here and let's figure out, instead of focusing on what we think he can't do, which is guard in space and guard smaller players, let's try to really figure out what he can do and figure out how we can alleviate the other stuff. These are not similar players in any way whatsoever, but the biggest reason Steph Curry went deeper in the draft than he obviously should have gone is because folks got so focused on what they thought he couldn't do as opposed to just looking at what's right in front of them. And I think if you do that with Zach Edey, you will see something that can be useful at the NBA level. I'm not betting my mortgage on it.
I hear you.
But I like the idea from Dan Hurley. This guy is something special. Figure it out.
And I'll curl it back to the college angle here because the pro stuff is very intriguing. And the next two games, if they play two games, obviously we'll add to his NBA file there. But there's been like semi-consistent talk about how the men's game, and we're going to talk some women's college hoops before we get out of the show as well, has lacked star power. And I'm not saying that it has had a Zion Williamson level star. I'm not saying that. But we have a two-time, as you said, Wood and Naismith Award, CBS Sports Player of the Year. And Zach Edey is an attraction. Because he doesn't have a huge personality, I get that. But in this very Final Four between Edey, DJ Burns practically overnight, and Klingon, who is not even the most important player on UConn's roster, I reject that, and I think it's actually been a disservice to Edey because you can't tell me he's not interesting. He's 7'4" and can go for 34 and 19 on a given night. To me, you can't tell me that's not interesting and that's not star power. Two-time National Player of the Year. We haven't seen it in 4 decades.
And he has shown some personality in post-game interviews with the great Evan Washburn.
Give us some more, Zach.
And in other places, and I think all of that is starting to grow. Maybe if you wanted to say 2 months ago that college basketball doesn't have an identifiable, recognizable star, I'd listen to you. But if Zach Edey were walking down basically any street in America right now, people would know who he is.
That's bang on. Yes, not even just here at the Final Four, but the nature of the tournament, Purdue being a top 3 team most of the season, and Edey being 7'4", he is identifiable. He is a huge star. And oh, by the way, no matter what happens here, GP, he is an all-time legend because of his 2-time National Player of the Year accolades and everything he's done to get Purdue to a Final Four. Legendary status. You cannot take that from him.